guys, welcome back to Ironside Ranch. We are here with the Unabomber coming from us from his basement, man. Hey, Travis, how you doing?
How's it going, guys? I'm just in the awkward stage of growing out my hair. It sounded like a good idea right until I got to this point where I can't. It's just ball cap. It's just ball cap week after week right now. So
I know I can't stand long hair, man. It starts driving me crazy. But I've always wanted to. But and Amanda Lynn hates it, so it's never an option for me.
This is the second attempt, so we're gonna make it through this time, I think.
Well, if y'all have not checked out Trav's channel, he runs a channel called On-Site Trav. We'll put the link down in the description. Y'all go over there and check out his stuff. He's got, kind of like us, he covers everything from what his little hobby farm is doing to what's going on with inflation. And so that's what we're actually going to talk about today. We're going to jump right into it with hyperinflation, and we are going to hit this that we're seeing on whatever CBS or CNBC or whatever news station it was that talked about the 2 weeks to all of us dying, basically. And so we'll touch on that here in just a minute. But hyperinflation. Trav, what's coming and when? Let's just hit that off. What do you?
All right, so
on with this?
All right, so at very first we got to define what hyperinflation is because it gets way overused. Technically, it's like 15% a month price increases, which means you're getting like a doubling every like 6 to 9 months of prices, and then it speeds up. But like 15% a year in America for all like reasonable purposes is hyperinflation.
Right. So there's a definition that I heard that I like the best, to where they say that is superinflation, hyperinflation being, my understanding was 50% inflation or more month over month. But again, there's different definitions on, so you're right, we do need to define that first. But so for practical intents and purposes of this video, we'll say anything that falls into that superinflation category, which I'm going to put over 10% and going up, because that affects us directly.
Yeah, absolutely. The second thing I got to say is, though I see the case for hyperinflation, I agree with it, because when you have the interest rates that are artificially set lower than the stated rate of inflation, you're going to be in inflation. It's like brakes on a train. Like if you're going 20 miles an hour and you're not willing to apply brakes at like 21 miles an hour of negative pressure, you're not stopping. Mm-hmm. Like you can apply them at like 5 miles an hour of pressure, but like that train's moving and like it's not going to stop. So with interest rates being like, let's just say 2% and inflation being like 8.6, it's moving pretty darn good. Interest rates really need to be like 10%, 12%. And that's if the inflation number was real. If the inflation number is not real, let's say that the real inflation is around 14 or 15, then interest rates need to be like 16 or 17.
Yep.
So we're in inflation, but inflation can switch to deflation immediately. Like a case for this is, what's the value of your home worth if mortgages are now 20% interest rate? Mm-hmm. So like, my property that I have here might be worth 700,000 or so, or let's just say like, 500 ounces of gold at this point in time. But like, if somebody can't get a loan for that, it's worth what somebody's willing to write a check for. Mm-hmm. And there might be a buyer for what we have at that number, but like there might not be a buyer. And the buyer that comes along might have 150 or 200. So like what I'm saying is that these two forces, like inflation and deflation, are like constantly pulling at each other. Mm-hmm. And like right now it seems like inflation is winning, but like it can cause a demand deficit. Like you can have like you can crush the demand. And like it can go the other way.
So that's a good point, because I want to talk about fall real estate here, but with you leading into that, so I mean, one of the things that I look at with it is everybody talks about, okay, are we headed towards, is a bubble about to pop? We're going to see 2008, right? So Ninja's been talking a lot about that. Then there's other people that are in the industry that think that we're headed more towards a gradual decline. Personally, I think that unless the Fed I think that we're going to see a pretty big bounce unless the Fed does the 40-year interest rates, or the 40-year mortgages. If we can get and I don't know how we need to get a lender on here someday to explain this all to us, but if the lending will go to a 40-year note, then that'll allow those higher interest rates to actually be spread out over a longer period of time. Because the fact is that most people don't care how much the house is; they care how much monthly. And though, I mean, you're probably with me on this, that I don't think that that's a smart way to run your personal finances. That's how most people look at it, and that's what runs the market.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's everyone looks at things based on cash flow. Like everyone looks at it based on cash flow. How much are you bringing in versus how much are you spending? And so if you can, I mean, really all you're doing is stretching the road out. Like if we've kicked the can every time that we ran into a problem, mainly I just have to say the baby boomers have done this. Like they've every single time they ran into a problem, whether it was like Black Monday in the 80s, I mean, they kind of did the right thing back then. But like 2001, they like bailed themselves out. 2008, they bailed themselves out. 2020, they bailed themselves out. And like they're at the spot where you could say that they're out of like, they can't kick the can down, but like they're trying to extend the road. Like,
yeah, and that's just nature. So, I mean, I don't really necessarily want to blame it on the baby boomers because everybody's going to do that, and every generation is kicking this can down the road. It doesn't matter, and it makes it a nice story for us all to point the finger at each other. And it's the baby boomers.
Yeah, it's true.
Some millennials. But the fact is that it's really none of our faults, anyways. It's all those mudsuckers up in Washington that screwed everything up from the get.
I mean, to an extent, we got the politics that represented our people. It represented our core philosophy. As a society over the last 30 years. We've moved in this direction. And if you talk to the average guy like 5 or 6 years ago, he was like, oh yeah, I definitely believe in these things. Like now these things have come to like fruit, and we're finding like we don't really like the fruit. So I mean, to get like real direct on like what do you do like if you're in this hyperinflation? This is something I've thought about a lot. And one, I've learned like from watching people that went through hyperinflation. So that's like I just went like right to people that like have gone through this thing. Star Academy is one guy. He was Eastern European guy, and he went through this. And he was like, look, metals saved people's like butt. Like if you really really want to like preserve capital, like silver, gold, copper, like things that you can trade and barter with. Old tools were a big deal, like things that people can farm with, things that are useful, things that have real value. But the one thing that he brought up that I thought was like, wow, didn't think about this, was property taxes. If you didn't have a way to save for your property taxes as the property appreciated in the currency, you just got priced out of being able to pay the taxes on it. And so at some point in time, it was just like, oh, well, my taxes now are like what my entire property was worth when I bought it like 10 years ago. And like I just I can't pay all that in 1 year. So I thought it was really interesting. But what I found through like all of these different scenarios, and I've been studying monetary history now for a while, and like I'm just into this. Every hyperinflation ends with a deflation according to hard money or sound money standards. So like we could say that the property I'm on right now, like in today's dollar terms, is worth like 700 grand, give or take. You could buy maybe 500 ounces of silver with it or so. But like in an absolute like hyperinflation, maybe it goes into like the millions on paper, but then it'll go into like this deflation according to silver or gold, where like we'd be lucky to get like 20 ounces of gold for it. Like, which is really interesting. If you look at the German hyperinflation, like people bought entire city blocks for like 6 ounces of gold.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is really eerie. Like hotels purchased for 3 ounces of gold, like downtown Berlin. Obviously, it was like wartime, sort of. Well, it wasn't wartime. Excuse me. It was the 20s. It was the 1920s. So it was like downtown Berlin, like a lot of history down there, like a lot of like beautiful buildings, and like so they all like they go through like this like, and then they like crash like to like a lower standard than like what was before. So that made me think like, okay, well, if this is like a wealth transfer, then how do I partake in that? And like the main thing that I learned is like you have to get through the trade. Like, yeah, you might have like this bag of gold, let's say, but like if you have to use it halfway through the ride, you don't get that wealth transfer. You just stay afloat. Like you don't sink, which is the real goal. But like you don't end up on the other side of this like made out well from it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the fact is that this whatever recession, crash, depression, whatever you hell people want to call it, is going to be pretty substantial because we're seeing all the indicators of several periods of hyperinflation, depression, and recession all at once, right? We're seeing all the signs of the shitty mortgage jobs back in 2008, 2006. We're seeing all of that come to play, and people think that, well, they fixed all that. That's not going to happen again. Well, the fact is they haven't fixed it. They just changed the names on everything, and I mean we're still doing commercial CMBSs, and so there's no change to the lending practices.
Yeah,
it's a little bit harder for Joe Schmo to go in there and get a 120% loan on the house, but for the fact of the matter is that the lending practices are still really piss poor, and so we're seeing all those signs, and then We're seeing the inflationary signs that we saw in the 1970s and 1980s, and then there's people that, I mean, Chris over at Financial Fitness, he's doing a video on this week or I think he's putting it out this week, where he's comparing everything to the Great Depression and showing why everything lined up with the Great Depression and the stock market crash. So we're seeing like all these things kind of come to a head, which is why I think this is going to be substantial, and it is going to be a great wealth transfer that is going to create a lot of opportunity for a lot of people. It's also going to create a lot of heartache and a lot of hurt for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's going to probably create political unrest and possibly revolution, and like it's very real. I mean, it's a very real possibility that America is on a path that is actually way worse than the fall of the Soviet Empire.
Yeah. Yeah,
like way worse. Like based on the math and the numbers, we're actually 3.5 times worse. Yeah. That's just the math. Because like they were running the Soviet Union on 15% of GDP. We're running America currently on 52.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So and it fell apart in like the late 80s, and it took till like 91 for them to like dissolve it. Mm-hmm. So like we're kind of like at that spot where like the plane is coming apart, but it's very much still together. But like it doesn't seem like there's any willpower to. This is where it's so easy to get down like conspiracy tunnel, like where you're like, well, do they have a new system that they want to move us to? And like what may that look like? Well, it looks like basically like allowing the old system to go away. And then no matter how you have the old system go away, that's a rough transition. Mm-hmm. Like especially if it takes like, I mean, if it happens instantly, that's rough. If it happens over 5 or 10 years, that's rough.
Yeah.
Like, if it happened over 30 years and no one even noticed it, it'd be like, okay, but like there's just that's just not how systems go, Like you update your computer and it's like, boom, new system. And it's like, that's, I think, the part now that kind of has me thinking a lot about it, because it's like you look at these situations and like one thing they could do is they could up the interest rates. Like on a Monday morning or a Sunday night or whatever it may be, they could just go, hey, interest rates now are 12%. Inflation is now solved. Housing market crushed, construction crushed, recession, demand, like demand destruction done, like hoard your dollars. And like
what they did in the 70s.
Yeah, they could do it. It's just the question is that the largest borrower in the world is the U.S. government, and they currently owe $30 trillion. And so if the interest rate that they have to pay is 10%, they would have to pay theoretically $3 trillion a year just in interest. But the current national budget, I believe, is around $4 trillion, but the tax receipts are around $3 trillion. So they would have a deficit of interest payments of 3, tax receipts of 3, so they would zero out. They'd still have to run the government at 4. Mm-hmm. So they couldn't run the government. So what that looks like is like Soviet collapse. Like, hey, there's no paychecks here. So either you keep interest rates at 0, so you don't really ever pay interest, and you continue to run the government at a deficit of 30% a year, roughly, like $1 trillion or more. And that's without any stimulus bills or any sort of like, money going to Ukraine or like stuff that wasn't like, budgeted. Or you don't. I mean, it's one of these things where it's like, you got to like let one of the two go, like the currency go or like the economy go.
Well, and that's one thing I've been saying for years as far as the, and you hate to call them entitlements because that's what the government calls them as entitlements, but, into Social Security, it's not an entitlement. I should get that. But the fact of the matter is that everybody across the board is going to have to take a hit on these programs, whether it's, the VA, the Social Security, and I got it. Nobody wants to take those hits because it is very politically unpopular, but the money's simply not there. So either you lower the price of the commodity, right? Because that's effectively what it is. You either lower the price of the commodity, or you've got to have more cash flow to buy it. So you got to raise taxes. Take a pick. I mean, they both.
Yeah. Well, yeah. My numbers I blurted out, and this is like a Rick Rule stat. So I haven't like looked it up myself, but the source is trusted and like inspect the source. But like he claims that off balance sheet liabilities is an additional 90 to 95 trillion payable by 2030. So like U.S. debt is like 30 trillion plus we owe the boomers. That's who we owe 95 trillion in like benefits, like VA, like all that type of stuff. Like we owe that class, like, or that demo, like that. Yeah. We owe that generation that much. And it's like, well, we could have austerity where we don't pay it. And then if we don't pay it, then do we have any national debt? And that's a serious option. Like, okay, we default on the national debt. We still take in $3 trillion a year in tax receipts, and we cut the budget by 30% on the federal level. everything's cool. Like, which could totally happen, right? People would be pissed. Like, there'd be a lot of people would be pissed, but at least the thing still functions. Or we just say, hey, we're going to pay everybody and we're going to print it. And like historically, our entire lives, they've always printed it.
Yeah.
So it's reasonable to think that they'll print an additional 95 trillion before the next 8 years. Mm-hmm. And they just print what we're experiencing right now. This is why I agree with you on hyperinflation if they take this path. What we're seeing right now is the results of 2 years at $10 trillion. It's not that big of a deal. Like $5-6 fuel is not that big of a deal. Like when we spend another 90 trillion, like it'll be like $25 fuel. Like it'll all be relative. It'll all be relative. So, which way are they going to go? Do they just cut benefits but yet still have inflation? They're in a bad spot.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a really valid point. Is that everybody's looking at, and including me, I've been looking at what's going to happen next year. And you're right, the next 8 years could be extremely rough. And I'm not sure at this point in time that it's going to matter the political stance of who gets in office.
No,
everybody thinks that Donald Trump is a big savior on the right, and I'm not sure that he can fix it as much as I was a big Trump fan, but I'm not sure that he can fix it. And I'm not sure that there's many politicians that could go in there and fix it because the system is so at this point in debt. So I think you're right. I think they're just going to print it because printing it is the only way politically to make everybody happy short term. Because what happens is that if they don't print it and they choose the hard answer, everybody gets mad, votes these guys out of office. Whoever loses the next election. Doesn't matter which side.
Yeah, guaranteed. Yeah,
if they print it, they can pass it off and they can say, oh, it was them. No, it was them. No, it was them. And they play that same game over again.
Yeah. I mean, you have to have a politician who's willing to fall on the grenade.
Yeah.
Who goes in there going like, I'm jumping on the grenade. That's what I'm doing. Like, I'm here for one term and like, this is what we're doing. I mean, in a way, Trump had the opportunity to be the guy.
Yeah.
Like, pandemic thing happens. Obviously, the Federal Reserve like literally ran out of cash and the repo market spiked in September 19th of 19. And like, there's all these issues. And then you got this pandemic, and then Trump comes out. We're going to shut down the economy. We've got to print money, the whole thing. At that point that they decided to do that, he could have not signed any bills. And it would have just been like a come to Jesus moment. And it would have been like, all right, you want to be Andrew Jackson? You want to really be Andrew Jackson? Let's do it, baby. Next move is abolishing the Fed. Like, because he was always claiming to be Andrew Jackson, right? He's like, oh, yeah, and people most identify me with Jackson. It's like, really? Like, Jackson's pretty BA. Like, he shot people literally at the White House. He dueled anyone who talked smack to him. They said that the man who weighed 110 pounds and 6'2" rattled like a bag of marbles from all the rounds that were in him. And, like, he destroyed the Second National Bank of America. Like, there was a Federal Reserve of America, and Andrew Jackson's last words were, I killed the bank. I mean, he did some crazy things to the Native Americans and like a lot of stuff I don't agree with. But like, he was right as far as dealing with the central bankers. And so, but would you have a politician that would have that clout to get in? So he has to be a populist and and then would do that. And it doesn't seem like that. And so it seems like we're kind of in this schoolyard fight where no one's going to get along until there's like this fallout. And then once there's this fallout, there'll probably be like this healing and this new like way forward. There'll be this path forward. But like at the moment, it doesn't seem like we can get everyone to agree to get on the same bus. It seems like we're all just going to sit here and, posture. So like as the little people, like how do we position ourselves to like be a blessing to like our friends, our family, like those around us? How do we survive it? Hyperinflations are very survivable. So are deflations. It's just hyperinflations are very good for wealthy elites. Like as far as like if you had to pick like Odysseus, like which storm do you ride your boat through? Like the one that's going to take half your crew or the one that's going to take all your crew? Well, like hyperinflation is half the crew. Like more than half in America are going to get wiped out, but like the super elites are going to do just fine. Like, and they're going to get even wealthier on the way up. And if you have a deflation, in a way, though for savers and people who are very conservative, it does well. Basically, everyone gets wiped out. Because if you did the right thing your entire life and you have like you live in a $200,000 home and you put 20% down on it and you did a 30-year mortgage, you saved up 40 grand and put it down on a house. And that house is worth 200 grand because mortgages exist at 3% interest. But like if you went through an actual deflation, like where interest rates were 18% and like you had a 1929 where like wealth destruction, like it just occurred, like the S&P was no longer worth like, Apple wasn't worth 2.7 trillion. Apple was worth like 100 million. Like you had like real like wealth destruction. Even if you did the right thing, that house is now only worth like 25 grand, 30 grand, 40 grand. It's worth whatever someone could pay for it. You're wiped out. And if you can't pay the mortgage on it, you're done. It goes back to the bank. Like you're wiped out. And if the bank can't pay their liabilities, they're wiped out. So like if you can pick one, you pick hyperinflation, because the guy that did the right thing, he's going to get wiped out on the property taxes, the utilities, the maintenance. Like he'll just eventually not be able to afford it, and the bank will get it back. And then when the bank gets it back, you can like come out with your new system. Like you can nationalize it. Not that that's like I'm not saying that that would be the premeditated thing that they are doing at this point in time. But if they choose not to pick a path, we're on the White River raft down to hyperinflation at the current point in time, especially if they continue to print.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, you're right. There are ways of taking advantage of hyperinflation. And one of those ways is using that devaluation of your currency to pay your freaking house off. We bought our house for $200,000. It's worth about $400,000 now because of the way that the real estate market has gone. And but we're basically gonna use this hyperinflation to crush our house loan and be done with it, be out of our mortgage.
Yeah.
But we were able to do that because I don't have a car loan, I don't have credit cards, I don't have a bunch of other debt stacked up. And again, I have sympathy for people like that, but you need to be tackling.
Yeah, I mean, look, my truck used to be like, when I got it, I got a 7.3 diesel is what I drive around. When I bought it originally, it's got a small tank, like 25 gallons. I used to fill the thing up for $50. Now it's like, what's it, 25 times 6, whatever that is now. Like, so now I'm filling it for like 150. Like if I've never let it empty.
Mine's the 5.9 Cummins. Mine's the 3500 with the dually, so it's got the big tank in there. It's like
a
36-gallon tank.
Yeah.
It costs me a fortune to fill it right now.
Oh, dude, I had to add a tank in mine, so I have a secondary. But it's like, can you stay in the trade? Because if you can't stay in the trade, then, you don't really get the benefits of hyperinflation because your money went to like food and fuel. Mm-hmm. Like you got smoked. You know what I mean?
This is why Robert Kiyosaki always talks about, rather than having money in the bank and in your 401ks, you should have it in the assets that are producing you income, because those assets will ride with that inflation. Yeah, they might have a little lag, but they're going to ride with that inflation wave, and they'll stay with it. So things like owning businesses and owning real estate, and businesses that are strong businesses, that have strong backings, that have good management principles, and good, they're capitalized correctly, and that are managed correctly. Those are very valuable assets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, it's just figuring out. It's just so weird to think through a hyperinflation in America. Like I'm almost in that never going to happen, bro, category. And I hate being on that side where it's just like, man, you really conceptually think through what that would look like. And I'm with you. I see the opportunity in it. But then at the same time, I see like it could really legitimately, for a family of 4, get to $2,000 a month to feed them.
Yeah. And I think that's, so I look at it with our family right now. So we've got 3 kids. And with 3 kids in our family, and we produce 100% of our own meat, a good solid portion of our own fruits and vegetables, that's growing year by year as our orchard grows. Right, we've done videos on that stuff, and even with all that production, we're still at $1,000 a month for food. And wow. Granted, that's a little bit extra so that we can put some back, but we're at $1,000 a month for food is what we're paying right now. And my wife is a thrifty shopper. And I think when I hear people say, oh, my God, I can feed myself for a month off of $200, it's like, I don't think you have any idea what a budget is, my friend. Like, you're guessing what you
Yeah. I mean, look, that's the thing is when typically these things break. Like I'm really into, I kind of into like studying how these empires have gone, because there's been a lot of the Spanish were ruling things and the Dutch were ruling things and the Brits were ruling things, and like how these things, the Chinese have been in power, the world's power, twice before. People forget that. Before the Spanish, like the Chinese empire was like, it was, these are the first people that went to paper money. They're like pioneers in this stuff. But like all of these things typically end in, or they go down they wrap up when the inflation really starts. Like when they devalue, the currency, that's when the empire is over. And so we live in like a very globalized world where like my avocados come from like, I mean, I'm growing them, but it's taking a long time for them to like produce. I mean, my avocados are coming from like 1,500 miles away, 2,500 miles away. Like the idea that that's going to be a thing as the empire like kind of starts to putter out, it's like, it's not the end of the world, but like avocado toast might not be a thing anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
I've thought about this all the time because, you know, the fact is that the average produce travels 1,200 miles to get to your plate, I think is what it is. And that to me, that's a failure of our food system. That's people trying to get rich quick rather than taking the long term. And what I mean by that is your farming practices start getting backwards, and we'll talk about this in our other video, but the farming because you're running monoculture farms that are not healthy for the soil. They require nitrogen fertilizer and the NPK, right? You have to have these soil additives and stuff to do this, and it wasn't, I shouldn't say a get rich quick scheme because nobody looked at it like that, but they looked at it like, okay, this is what the science is telling me at the time. We didn't realize that the science had been bought and paid for by Monsanto, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, and everyone wants that short-term quarter result. You know, it's just like, yo, I want to show my shareholders profit this quarter, you know, this year. No one wants to be like, yo, this is going to take 7 years, bro. Like, this is going to take 10 years to get it. Like you get to a guy like Joel Salatin who's been on the same farm, like, where he's got like 50 years in, and he's using like no input cost, you know, and his profit margins are fat. And you're like, okay, that took time. It's kind of like right now.
Generations. I mean, his dad started the farm. His dad died. Having paid off the farm, never making a profit.
This is the problem I have with life, Mackay, is that everything good takes time and it's hard.
Yeah.
Like right now, okay, like I got fat in the last couple of years, right? Like we were building this house. I'm like, oh, I'll let, you know, just whatever. And then I turned like 30 and I didn't realize like you can't do what you did in your 20s when you turn 30. You got to work at it, right? Well, like, so now I'm at this spot where I'm like not hitting my goals because I let it go. And I'm like, well, I want these results and I want them now, right? What can I do? Well, the answer is like, well, you probably, like looking at my math, my little app, it's like the answer is this, you won't get to this point that you want to be at for the next 9 months. And I'm like, oh, well, you don't understand. Like I got parties to be at this summer. You know what I mean? Like I got things to go do. It's like but like the truth of it is like, I'm sure there's some sort of crazy thing I can do, but the reality of it is like, it's just going to take hard work.
Yeah. It does. Like, I tell people that as a general business rule, right, as a principle of running business, people that run successful businesses are not like, you know, overly intelligent. They're not super lucky. Yeah, you have the Elon Musk out there, but Elon Musk did not get wealthy overnight, and he did not get wealthy by being a buffoon. He got wealthy because he made calculated business decisions over and over and over again.
I mean, Musk is an interesting point. I mean, he built a heck of a personal brand. And like cash will follow that brand wherever it is, whether they're making money or not.
Yeah. Like, well, and so Musk is a different story. But my point is that business owners are people that make consistently good decisions. Or you're going to make mistakes. I've lost money. You've lost money. We've all lost money. Lost a lot of money, actually. We make good decisions over time, and that's what allows us to be successful business owners. So, Travis, we need to wrap this one up. I guess the last thing I want to end with is how to hedge against inflation. What should people be doing right now this second? Let's just take 3 minutes.
So silver, gold, these things, right? Cryptocurrency is interesting because it's like smuck insurance. Like if you really legitimately had a hyperinflation, like your Bitcoin's going to be good for goods and services. You know, I mean, it's a kind of a really bullish case for like these people messed up, but hey, good news, we have like this Bitcoin. Now, in a hyperinflation scenario in America, does Bitcoin function? Like as far as a network, yes, but like does the power grid function? Like I don't know. You know, like there's.
The fact is I think what you'll see with cryptocurrencies is if people start seeing a massive devaluation in the dollar, they'll start running from it further and further, which is going to cause that devaluation to go to skyrocket. Yeah. But what they'll be running to is gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, assets, and they'll be immediately trading them. And it's basically what happened in Germany, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Now, I mean, they didn't have the crypto option. I'm not saying because right now we're seeing all the debt in crypto space get blown out right now. Like they're getting blown out. Like as the crypto continues to drop and drop, people are getting liquidated, margin called, like they're selling. So we're finding the real base, like wherever that real base is, probably around 10 grand. I mean, who knows? But like that was where the base was before 2020. So we'll see where that base is. But like ultimately from my research, silver, gold, things that you can barter with, because you don't go to a silver and gold economy, you go to a barter economy when the thing fails out.
So that's what people don't realize. Because Dave Ramsey talks about this all the time. Yeah. He says, you don't want silver and gold. Silver and gold's worthless. Look at it over the long term. It's a horrible investment.
Yeah, over the last 21 years, it's beat the S&P. But yeah, Dave, gotcha.
No, I know.
Yeah.
The thing is that I look at with it is you have to look at what has value during regime changes and during these time period changes, right? So let's just take Iraq right now, right? Iraq being in a period of turmoil over the last 20 years because we went in there and blew them all to hell, and then has been fighting there for 20 years. Where we've installed governments, they've had regime changes, et cetera, et cetera. It's all very complicated. But bottom line is they've been in these regime changes. Gold and silver never lost their value. Now the Saddam Hussein dollar with Hussein's face on it, that isn't worth anything now. No. But the gold and silver is still worth its value, and it can still be traded for the same things. And this is what we talk about. Silver, 1 ounce of silver is worth a chicken. 1 ounce of gold is worth a cow, right? And that's pretty much been true, right? A gold coin, a 1 ounce gold coin has been able to buy you a finely tailored suit or a cow.
Wow, I didn't know about the chicken, but that makes sense though. Yeah. Yeah, that's neat. I'm gonna be looking that up because I've been looking at these ratios and trying to measure everything according to ounces, because that really is the only thing, especially from a biblical perspective. I mean, in Proverbs, this is a great thing to do. Like, there's 31 Proverbs. You ought to read one a day, even if you're not even a Judeo-Christian type of you ought to read one because, dude. Solomon was a boss. He was the richest guy that ever lived. Guy had like 700 wives or whatever, you know what I mean? He ran like the entire earth before like the Romans, and like the guy wrote down some proverbs, and like his stuff is pretty good. And
people don't realize how rich that society was. That society was so rich that the common peasants had gold mugs and cups in their house because it was such a rich society.
I mean, Solomon was running it. And it was like, look, silver and gold, like the Lord like hates unequal weights. Find no pleasure with him. Like, I just read that this morning, and today's thing, and it's like, this stuff's supposed to have like weight. We're supposed to be able to measure it. So when you say it against a chicken, you're like, you know what, that makes total sense, actually. So I mean, actionables, like stuff that has barterability, and this is Mackay's thing, but I just learned this. I'm new to the game here. Traditionally a bow guy, but like I didn't realize that rounds our currency. Robert Kiyosaki enlightened me on this when he talked about 5.56, and he said, look, I have a warehouse of pallets of 5.56 unmarked because they're not serial numbered or anything like that. So they have they have this fungibility aspect. I bought them for 5 cents. I bought a lot of money in them, and they went to $1. And so now I sell some for $1. I bought for 5. And I'm like, Robert Kiyosaki made a 25x on a currency called 5.56. Yeah, I didn't know about that world. That's your world. But like, that is a currency.
Man, I wish I'd bought a pallet of ammo 10 years ago. I'll tell you that. But it is something that my wife and I do consider. We like to keep ours, and I always try to stay a little bit away from that stuff on the YouTube. So we won't go too into depth on that. But
it's metals, I guess. Just say metals.
Metals. Let's just say copper, gold, lead,
brass,
silver, and brass.
I mean, real stuff. I mean, really, at the end of the day, real stuff. But here's the real golden nugget of surviving a hyperinflation. And Cuban, the anti-gold guy, this is what he said: in a hyperinflation, what you'll have is banana. You have banana. That's what people want. People want producers. If you can produce something, like whatever it is that you can produce, you're going to do well. As long as you can just figure out how to produce things. Because like in hyperinflation, everything is changing. You're going through like a real true transition. And it's not about like this value or that value. I mean, gold and silver are the ultimate because they're like pretty liquidable for almost anything because someone can take them and get what they want. It's not that they want the gold or silver. It's they want what they want. And it's a method to do it. But the ultimate answer is you have to be a producer. And you have to be a producer of something in need.
Yep. I think that's a great place to end this show. So we're gonna go record another video right now. So guys, if you have not checked out Trav's video or Trav's channel, On-Site Trav, please go and do that. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Really enjoyed having you.
Dude, I'm glad to jump on, man. It was fun.
All right. Hey, make sure y'all like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. We'll talk to y'all later. Yeah.